Thank you everyone for coming to our session, E-mobility in Illinois. Hopefully everyone's been having a good Transport Chicago conference, and thanks for choosing our session. So obviously over the last couple of years, e-mobility has become, really come to the forefront, not only in our communities and in our state, but really all over the country. And it's really become a very prevalent thing just within society. And these technologies are really changing how people move through our communities, creating new opportunities for mobility, sustainability, and accessibility. But at the same time, they do raise a lot of questions about infrastructure, safety, regulations, and enforcement, and how the needs of all users of the road kind of need to be taken into account. So it's a topic that's becoming increasingly relevant for local governments, advocates, law enforcement, and residents alike, which is why we're very fortunate to have such a fantastic panel that really covers all of that today. The perspectives of the panelists maybe differ, but they all do have the same goal, which is creating communities where people can move safely, efficiently, and comfortably. So joining us today, we have Sidney Kenyon, who is the Transportation Director for the Village of Schaumburg.
Thank you.
Rudy Faust, who is the Director of Ride Illinois. And Brian Budny, who is the Deputy Chief of Police at the Village of Deerfield. And my name is Eric Czarnota with the Northwest Municipal Conference, and behind me is my colleague Brian Larson, who helped with a lot of the e-mobility stuff that our organization has done over the past year. But without a further ado, we'll pass it off to Sidney, who will start us off with the presentation.
Thank you. Is this on? Good? Is it on? Everybody here? All right, good. This is it? Good. Okay, so as introduced, I'm Sid Kenyon. I'm the Transportation Director of the Village of Schaumburg. My department has a lot of similar responsibilities perhaps to CDOT, where we do the planning, the engineering, and then we pass it off to our friends in the Engineering and Public Works Department to take a project through to completion. But we also do a lot of bike ped, transit, and a bunch of governance-related items that come with the job. So, just want to focus in a little bit today what we're talking about with e-mobility. It's generally defined as anything that involves bringing you around whatever environment you're in that is powered by an electric motor. However, we're not talking about electric mobility up at the top. This is specific to different vehicles. We're talking specifically about low-speed, small electric-powered transportation devices. And this is where the term personal comes in, because they are specifically to transport you. These are electric scooters, e-bikes, electric assist bicycles, but some of the other fun ones. And I put them here on a spectrum today because in the middle we have our fun established e-bikes and e-scooters, which everybody's very familiar with and generally enjoys riding in rideshare and bike share and scooter share programs. We have our more exotic ones on the right here. You might have seen the Segways riding around Grant Park. You might have seen people on these fun unicycle things or these fun one-wheel things. These are fun devices, and if you're like this guy or this guy and you're wearing a helmet, you're doing it right. Thank you very much. On the left here, these are the devices we're a little more concerned about because they're new, and while they might be fun, they are speedy. And therefore, this is what's gotten a lot of us on the municipal side a little bit concerned from a safety perspective, and that's the E-motos and the high wattage e-bikes. Some of you might have seen this exact graphic if you were watching Jane's presentation this morning. This is shared micromobility ridership in the US and Canada, and really the point here is to illustrate that our exposure to these devices is a lot of times driven by this shared micromobility availability that grew in the 20-teens, hit by the pandemic, and then grew some more. And a lot of this is dockless bikes, dockless scooters, and station-based devices, but some of these are e-devices, and so this is, nationwide. This is the exposure we're getting with these devices. And before I jump into this, I just want to say my perspective on this is these are great devices. They do provide additional mobility for folks that might struggle with a traditional pedal bicycle or other modes of personal transportation that might be challenging for somebody who is not fully able-bodied. However, as I jump into this, I'm going to go through some of the legislative stuff that led to this point, the popularity of the devices, and how we worked to push the state to make some action happen. So to start with our local history, in 2018, Public Act 100-209 was codified, which provided the new 3-tier system for low-speed electric bikes in Illinois. Yay, this is great. Everything under 28 miles per hour is now classified. Then during the pandemic, there's an explosion in demand for e-devices. You see a lot more folks riding e-bikes, a lot more folks riding e-scooters in places we haven't seen them before, such as regional trails. Then you move towards 2024, and there was this new law that came through, 103-899, which codified low-speed electric scooters. Is anybody familiar with this one? Yes. So this one was kind of goofy because it created this type of device called a low-speed electric scooter that was incapable of exceeding 10 miles an hour. And it said that any municipality or agency, to allow for these devices to ride on their paths, they would have to specifically authorize them. So that raised some question marks. Why are we talking about these? Well, we think that it's because they were toys, generally marketed to children. You can't ride these on the street, otherwise it's a safety hazard. But the impact was extensive confusion, because now all of a sudden, municipalities start thinking, well, wait, should we ban all e-scooters? What's going on? So then we move to 2025, which happens to be the year of the snake. So why are these attracting more attention, though? It's not just the confusion, there's more going on. Is it because they're more available? If you go into a Costco, if you go into a Sam's Club, if you look around on the internet, it seems like the prices were going down fairly quickly. We also noticed that there were more minors observed riding these devices than there were before. So that, again, caused some concern from parents, from folks around the community. Is it because there's more crashes? Well, it could be. There were some high-profile incidents in Elmhurst and Arlington Heights in particular, and there have been some even more recent than that. But the vast majority, of course, have involved a driver, contrary to certain predilections. Are they more affordable? As I mentioned, yes, they have become more affordable. Are there other factors? Are parents tired of watching their kids just sit on their screen like this? And they go buy them an expensive toy to go play outside with. Could be that too. But whatever it is, this is what our environment started looking like in the northwest suburbs. So this one on the left, these are the e-bike regulations as of September 2025. I'll go through the list real quick. They could be any one of these things related to a minimum age requirement, restrictions from bike paths, driver's license requirements, and restrictions from streets over a certain mile per hour, which that's now part of a state law as well. Some banned e-bikes anywhere in their village. Same thing with E-moto regulations. These didn't catch on as quickly, but as you see, there's a patchwork quilt developing here, and for e-scooter regulations, that just makes the typical rider totally confused. How are you going to abide by anybody's regulation if you go from Schaumburg to Elk Grove and you have completely different restrictions? So, being the transportation director, working with my board, I'll share with you a little bit about our experience in our village. For us, that Public Act 103-899 did cause a lot of concern, and I think for other municipalities, because the state legislature took out any language related to tort immunity, which, for those of you that are familiar with tort immunity, it's the way that municipalities are protected when they provide public infrastructure. And I'm not a legal expert, so don't challenge me on that one, but I know that that's typically where our enjoyment of flexibility comes from, to provide you with roads, sidewalks, bike paths, and to stay protected. And then in 2025, there's the explosion of riders, as I talked about, in our town. So we were told, okay, transportation, you need to develop an ordinance. All right, so here's what we came up with. Classes 1 and 2, anything that reaches up to 20 miles per hour for e-bikes, you can go on paths, you can go on streets, can't go on sidewalks. Class 3, can't go on paths. E-scooters, Anything less than 10 miles per hour, not allowed in the village, except on your private property. Paths and on-street, allowable for scooters, can't go on sidewalks. We also had minimum age. We had requirements for use of a helmet while riding. And we enacted penalties for noncompliance. What that did was that made the world a lot more complicated. This on the left here, this is Summit Drive. Summit Drive is a beautiful bucolic street in Schaumburg. There's houses all over the place. There's paths, there's parks, there's a school. If you're on your bike here, the world's your oyster. You want to ride on the street? Great. You want to ride in a bike lane? Perfect. You want to go on this little stripy part here? Perfect. Now, all of a sudden, if you're riding on an e-device, now your world's a lot more complicated. Do you want to ride on a path? Well, does your bike go faster than 20 miles an hour? Can't go here. Does your bike go faster than 28 miles an hour? Can't go anywhere. Are you on a scooter? Are you on an e-bike? Can't go on the sidewalk. So this starts to create some complications with how we get around. And if you extrapolate that to our neighboring communities, now you've got some real issues with trying to navigate throughout the Northwest burbs. And then to go through this list real quick, I just want to highlight that certain folks have said that these regulations were all developed without input from the public. I will say in the Schaumburg example, there was some input from the public at multiple stages. We had 2 transportation committee meetings, coffee with the council. We had a Bikeways Advisory Committee meeting. We got lots of complaints at both of these meetings, took those into our ordinance, passed it through Transportation Committee on June 3rd, Village Board on June 10th. But then the mayor says, you know what, we need to talk about this a little bit more. So why don't you come back next Tuesday so you can talk more about your ordinance we just said yes to. So my point here, though, is that this was all in the span of about 60 days. And I had maybe 20 total days to work on this without working with the public or having to work directly with the board to come up with an ordinance that worked. And a lot of communities found themselves in this particular situation where we're pressed to act quickly, but we're not given a lot of time in order to make things happen. So our friends at Northwest Municipal Conference were kind enough to convene a summit for us to all talk about this patchwork of regulations that were coming into play in the Northwest Municipal Conference area, Northwest suburbs. So I think Erica's going to walk us through that real quick, and then we'll move on to our next presenter.
Thank you, Sidney. Very quickly, so as Sidney had kind of mentioned, we kind of created those maps earlier that really showed the patchwork of ordinances that were kind of being placed in place by a lot of our communities that are members of our membership. So we decided to convene first a summit on e-mobility where we kind of had a panel discussion which included Chief Budny and Sidney as well as Executive Director of Ride Illinois, Dave Simmons, and then we also had Benjamin Schuster from Elrod and Friedman, so we kind of had a legal perspective. And we had over 100 people kind of attend that meeting, and then we kind of posted it after on YouTube, and hundreds of people have watched it there as well. And that kind of led and was kind of a springboard for our then e-mobility working group that the Northwest Municipal Conference created, which then started working on legislative language that ended up being House Bill 4840 that was championed by Representative Dittich and Representative Mary Beth Canty. At the same time, the Secretary of State was working on legislation, which is what eventually was passed with Senate Bill 336 and 3484, which was eventually passed and is in place now. But we also were working with the Secretary of State at the same time, and it was kind of a collaborative process on that. But that's kind of where the conference had come in, and we'd kind of seen the need for us as kind of the collaborators of all of these members to kind of come forth and try to right the ship a little bit, and hopefully we did. But that's kind of where the conference came into play. But now I will hand it off to Rudy.
You have the clicker? Oh, thank you. So I'll do the Sidney position here. So hi, I'm Rudy Faust. I'm a board member at Ride Illinois. we just mentioned Dave Simmons, our executive director, is actually on the Grand Illinois Bike Tour supporting that. So I'm in his stead today. Hope to represent it well. But, just as way of introduction, this will be a little Rauschenmann-ish. We'll be going over some of the same materials, but I want to bring in the perspective of a statewide advocacy organization to show, what our standing priorities are, have been, will be, sort of what we were working on coming up to this, and then really what went on from our perspective in this tight constraints and dealing with our members' concerns. So anything that we're saying that our concerns aren't, as you heard, there was a collaborative process here, but we're trying to address our members' concerns, and really, I hope conversations like these, which happened at the municipal conference, that we can continue to have these to anticipate issues that will come up in the future, because this is rapidly growing. So, just as for those who aren't familiar with Ride Illinois, our mission is really centered on advocacy, education, and awareness, which is growing bicycle ridership. That used to be very straightforward, what a bicycle is, but as we've heard, that's changing. This is out my front door 2 weeks ago, and every day, it's been very encouraging, because we see this adorable parade to school of cargo bikes, and we're seeing the growth of e-bike and e-mobility as the organization switches from recreational clubs and vehicular cycling, quite frankly, to everyday transportation, and what a bicycle has been changing. And so, and we view larger trends that are really supporting of that. Both positive trends of, I see Dave here, of building out protected infrastructure, connectivity, but also within the modal trends, and we'll say negative trends, but in the technical sense of that word, with people either choosing not to or not able to drive, aging out of driving, and the price of gas, and just pure preference. I won't spend too much time, because I think Sidney went really well over this, but we were part of the instrumental in the passage of the law in 2018, when e-bikes were, when we started really seeing them. And this is pretty standard across the nation of the three classes. And the motors here, even though it's based on speed and form factor, the motors really top out at 750 watts. And at that point, we weren't really involved in the scooter conversation, because we're like, okay, that's separate. I think one of the unintended consequences of our work leading up to that was we had just, within 2-year session, so the first year of this session in the State House, we had 2 great successes. We were like, there were concerns about batteries, and so we perhaps should have seen some of this coming, but with unlisted batteries and causing fires, that tragically in New York it was a much bigger issue, but we try to anticipate that and really devoted to the vehicle safety. But we're even more proud of our definition of bicycles, which in our law corrected the lack of adapted bicycles. So we were seeing the e-bikes really as useful for people of all abilities and ages, to really expand, central to our mission to expand ridership and to do it safely. But we're also, tragically, I couldn't update this slide. This is Damien Gomez, but we're also viewing, with e-bikes, we were just seeing that, tragically, that the issue really being that pedestrians and cyclists, the pandemic highs really, there's some fluctuations you might hear in the news like, oh, they went down, but really that, since the pandemic, they haven't gone down, the broader safety landscape. So, we were really concentrating on that and looking towards that, and had another bill with IDOT to really address some of the issues on the arterials especially. But, you can't choose, you can't choose the news. So we, as you can see, all these devices up here, let's see if I can use that handy laser pointer. Oh, look at that. So all these bikes up here were called e-bikes in the press. And as you see in this Daily Herald, this poor gentleman here was involved in a hit piece of being the reckless driver. And as far as I see, that's within class e-bike, and the people we're serving versus, I know the real panic was over the kids on E-motos. So hence the ordinances that we talked about. So, and this is a language issue. So this is the confusion I just talked. And what ended up happening is that legal e-bikes could fall under those definitions if we're just using e-bikes. We went over the local ordinances. I won't apologize for what the media, my critique of the media, as far as, I do appreciate the input, but what we were hearing from our members, and I think this is time even over process, was our members were totally caught off guard, and our organization had just gone through its own internal debate that there wasn't unanimous opinion about, where we stand on e-bikes even. So everyone was dealing under this, and, we had some of our older membership were really freaked out and feeling like they weren't being heard. And the ultimate concern, and I say this as a New Jersey native, is that it would become New Jersey, if you're familiar, with their last session, that they passed a law that Phil Murphy signed on his way out of office that basically required title, license, registration for all e-bikes, and that as an organization, we kind of have PTSD. This is from 2013 in Chicago. We occasionally always get these, like, if you've been around, any sort of bicycle planning, you've heard this, you should be, we should license bicyclists, they should be treated the same exact. And for that would be an existential threat to our organization. And even when we don't have these laws with e-bikes, as we've seen in New York City, there were police checkpoints at all the bridges, and they were pulling people off bikes and arresting them. So this was a very deep concern for us when we started seeing ordinances. So in response, we at least try to do guidance, and as you can see, it expanded beyond our core of class 1, 2, 3 bikes and to these out of class, as far as what we knew. And so that was the most immediate, remedy as we saw, so that at least the municipalities knew, what we saw as the law at that time. And I think it opened up dialogue, and as we heard before. So ultimately, I won't get, it's not yet signed, and even here, the later slides are wrong. It got put into a shell bill, 3484, it was 3336. Really, we had to go to just definitional, very basic terms, so that we, just as we were defining bikes in expansive ways for adaptive bikes, here we wanted to constrain, because we saw, these E-motos, like, we can't, we're getting beyond, the capacity of our organization, and they really don't fit our membership. And because we were already in the scooter debate, we were in them, but that's very much a live discussion of like how much we're going to be involved in scooters at all. And so, quickly, of course, because we're all planners, we do our summary charts. Happy to share that out. I won't go through all of them. I guess, with highlights, this is the give and take of the law or legislation where e-scooters, they set it at 15, excuse me. And then if I had just very, 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 very high level summarize it, they're really trying to take internal combustion engines, e-engines, and trying to set the same line at that 28 miles per hour. And then with the ages, you'll see with e-bikes, that class 1, 2, I know 3 is kind of the concern because it goes up to 28, that age is set at 15, lowering, and then class 3 is 16, and then non-family passengers with the cargo bikes, as I showed before, was 18. So we're really trying to bring these, or the law is trying to, if it gets signed, is trying to simplify it in a way. And I know this might be for the Q&A, because as planners, there is that level of preemption in allowing especially 1, 2, and 3 on any bike lane because of that connectivity. So, just going forward, I think, as an organization, we just learned that value, just the value of having, agreeing on definitions, first of all, and that we hadn't really been thinking of that as an organization, but really continuing revisiting what's a bicycle, and that's very much a live conversation, and that it should be done we argue on the state level. This is way beyond us. So, with the retailers, we noticed a lot of these out of class came in from online. So it's usually not your local retailers that are the issue. It's online, and unfortunately, given the federal environment, we think this needs to be done on the state level. So we're open to hearing more about how we can help on that. And then Ride Illinois is especially involved in state education level. Brian will get into some of the local efforts that he's really working on. But there's already a law on the book, a mandate on the book from 2018, and that really hasn't gone anywhere. So we really want to, we're hoping to roll out that curriculum in the next year, and then long term, we want to move driver's ed. How we teach is like, okay, kids, we're worried about that toy aspect of like, hey, kids, here's your bike until you can drive, and then you drive when you're, real adult. And we want to move, our long-term goal is to move to mobility education for more active, affordable transportation. So, and then finally, infrastructure that ultimately, and I'm probably a little over my skis, organization here, so I'm speaking as me. I think that ultimately it's about speed. If everything's going 20 or below, I think we're in much better shape. Everyone's safer, and it gets easier in urbanized areas. It's not nearly as expensive. So just ask that you keep us involved in the conversations going forward. And feel free to contact us and get me at happy hour or share out my slides. But I'll hand it off to Brian now. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I just want to say they covered everything, so I'm just going to open it up for questions at this point. I am going to give it a little bit of a different perspective from the law enforcement view. This sort of states it in 2 words, in my opinion, is safety is the main concern. It's a matter of what individuals are riding, and then the mobility, which we found out when I started working on all this, found out that it was a little bit more important than just where our complaints were coming in with the kids that were riding the scooters and such. What are our priorities? Obviously is the safety. We looked into crashes, injuries, fatalities, the public understanding of the laws and ordinances, and I'm going to go through a little bit of this pretty quick because Sidney and Rudy have already touched on a lot of this. But this is the type of stuff that we were looking at. With the education, like Sidney brought up, every community had something different or has something different still today, because when and if the governor signed it, that doesn't take effect, the new law, until January regardless. So we still got to make it through this summer with whatever is out there on the books. The Secretary of State, when we started looking at all this stuff and it started becoming an issue, was silent. They only regulated the class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes. So that posed a huge problem for everybody with definitions and such. Enforcement is difficult, to say the least, and I'll get into some stats, show you what we've been somewhat dealing with. And then also with the mobility, which was with the first, the summit with Northwest Municipal Conference, is like, I'm in Deerfield. You go to Highland Park, it's something different. You go to Northbrook, it's something different. So the mobility sort of gets limited and people cannot get to where they want to go. The consistency and the need for options to commute. Sorry. I'm not used to this anyway, so. An example that we found out through the process is that the use of these mobility devices to get to the train stations and that type of stuff, small trips to Whole Foods or whatever, was a big deal to our residents in Deerfield. Back in '23 is when I was sitting at a meeting and the mayor brought up, you know, we're starting to get a lot of complaints. His office was getting a lot of complaints and wanted somebody to start looking into it. And like any good police officer, my head went down and like looking for something else, which we all know that when you do that, you get selected. So I've been working on this since '23. And gathering stats and talking to other departments and other municipalities who has ordinances, and there wasn't much out there. It started to pop up pretty quick though, to the point of it was golf carts. Pretty much everything is out there, it's just a matter of how it's regulated. I'll move away again, sorry. Began tracking calls in '23 through our department with what type of stuff we were going on, and then had the meeting with the mayor and village managers concerning the bikes. I never, until I got in my position, knew what a committee of the whole meeting was, but when you're the center of them, having 3 of them based on your topic, it's difficult. And mind-boggling, to say the least. But we had, because a lot of questions sort of brought up, how do we put this out to the public? Did we have interaction with the public in our community on how we wanted to write our ordinance and to do our ordinance? So thus we had the 3 committee of the whole meetings. When we started getting an idea of the direction that the board wanted to go and the mayor wanted to go with our ordinance, we thought, okay, things are going to change, we get it, but let's start educating on what's out there. So we started doing a pretty good education and social media outreach on what's legal now, and sort of putting it out there that these things might not be legal in the near future. Our SROs, school resource officers, played a huge role in this. We basically posted them at the bike racks at the end of school before the kids were getting onto their bikes and e-bikes, e-motos, and all that, just to educate them on safety and, you know, that something is coming down the road to where some of these are going to be regulated a little bit different. We started getting a lot of phone calls from parents. I just spent $3,000 on this bike, and now you're going to tell me that he can't ride it. And basically we said, yes. So, so you can imagine the kickback we were getting from the community on that aspect of it. I did probably in December, I don't know how many phone calls I got when we started talking about this. Can I get this one for my child for Christmas? I'm like, if it was me, no, I wouldn't buy it, but that's the type of questions we were getting. A lot of our other education to the public and just sort of pushing it out there very indiscreetly about what the ordinance could possibly be. Our bike unit goes to the farmer's market on a consistent basis where they will just talk bike safety, just not necessarily what it is, what type of bike, but doing that. Did draft and present to the village board probably 4 or 5 different ordinances, ranging from everything's banned, everybody's walking now, to sort of what we made it to where we're at now. We did 2 readings for the ordinance, and the first reading, the boardroom was quite filled, and a lot of the comments and conversations that didn't make it to the committee, the whole meetings came up and talked to us about it. But ultimately, we took that into consideration and even changed it after the first reading to bring in the concerns for people. Like I said, I started in January, or in 23, but I started looking at calls that we went on, anything that had to do with a bicycle, an e-scooter, a e-bike, whatever you wanted to define it as. We had 64 calls for service related to these. We had 7 accidents with minor injuries, 20 educational contacts, and those type of contacts are our patrol officers stopping and talking with individuals and the kids riding the devices. 25 unable to locate the violation, meaning their bikes, scooters, e-motos, whatever, were faster than what we could get there to. And then we just had 12 general contacts where people would be calling the station or coming in and asking about them. Of those 64 calls, the vast majority was more January 24 through May of 25. So we averaged about 4 a month if you take that first year out of it with that type of stuff. These are the main points of our ordinance that is currently still enforceable. Any person under the age of 16 who does not possess a driver's license to operate, it has to be, basically you have to have a driver's license. We define, the way we wrote the ordinance is any device for this, any device that is not regulated by the state. And right now, the only bicycles that are basically regulated are class 1, 2, and 3. So anything, and then obviously the scooter, the 10-mile-an-hour scooter with those restrictions. We got some pushback on that, and some is being a nice word. But our thought process was, okay, they're getting on these devices that can go upwards of 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, depending on what they bought. 13-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old smart enough to realize that they got to stop at a stop sign, They gotta, you know, use their signals, have brakes, you know, our thought process was 16, they either got their driver's permit or starting that process and have some idea of the rules of the road and or somewhat responsible. Somewhat, keyword. So that was our thought process with that. And once we started explaining it a little bit, it went over a little bit better. We did bring in the adult responsibility. This is basically where if my son got stopped and got the ticket for doing something wrong, our policy at the Deerfield Police Department is any juvenile contact, we contact the parents. So that you know, we now know that mom and dad know about this contact. But if we get, like if my son then gets another one, and gets a third one, now the officer can also write me. Okay, so that sort of takes it home a little bit harder, where this is our way of around the seizure. We didn't want to be seizing these devices or taking them at this point. So that was sort of our way around that. May 19th, you see the change. May 20th is now where these stats came. After our ordinance, 46 calls in what, the 17 months, or excuse me, 13 months. 9 accidents. Yes, accidents went up, but out of those other 7 and these 9, they were all scooters. None of them were referenced the devices that we're talking about basically getting now. 11 educational contacts, 22 unable to locate them. 1 literally fled from the police. Officer tried stopping him, he took off, and our officers are instructed just to let him go, because that's all we need is a 13-year-old wrapping himself around a tree for doing that. 1 did stop where we got a traffic stop and got a warning ticket. And then 2 of the calls, they were doing everything right. It was the right bike, right spot, so there was no issues. So this comes out to about 3.5 calls a month, so we're getting better. Half a call a month, so we're getting a little bit better. Not going to bore you with this because this was said, I think, twice already. We at the Deerfield Police Department, you get any police department, I guess, you know, somebody gets hurt or injured, you weren't doing enough. You weren't doing enough. You know, fingers get pointed at us. With what we have been doing, it seems to be working. We see a lot less of these devices, but about the same amount of calls. So when I say the enforcement plan is common sense, is what seems to be working, you know, the $100 ticket to mom and dad or the 13-year-old or whoever you write this violation to, mom and dad are paying it anyways. This individual is not paying it. So the education aspect is actually working the best for us. And as you can see, we've written 1 warning ticket out of all these calls. So the vast majority, like I said, or all of the accidents were scooters. And it was the scooter riders' fault in all of the crashes, which goes along to, and younger individuals, which sort of plays into our initial philosophy of the driver's license, knowing the rules of the road and that aspect. So we're still staying with the common sense approach. These individuals, our officers are finding them in the parks if they find them and they have that educational contact. And even with that contact, they're letting the parents know. We hand out a pamphlet. This pamphlet has all the definitions and the way our current ordinance reads, so that we can, so they can take it home and give it to their parents and understand it. So, but identifying the future enforcement is going to be just as difficult with all the regulations, and yes, it's being defined a lot better. But next time you drive by or you see somebody on a class 1, 2, or 3, and I'm going to state it that way because tell me what you think it is when you're riding by, and how am I supposed to enforce that without knowing truthfully what it is, which goes into the E-motos and all the new definitions as well. So it makes it very difficult for us. I guess the best thing is that the individuals are hard to identify because they're wearing full face helmets. So we can't identify them. Pros and cons to that, can't identify them, okay, but they're wearing the helmet, so we're looking at that as a win. And if we don't chase them, they don't have to ride recklessly any more than they may already be. So that's me. If any of your departments, police departments want to give me a call, and I can share my pain with them, and we can, I'll be more than happy to help out. It's a different process of writing ordinances and all that, but I think it's working for us, and the consistency that this new law, when it's signed, will help the mobility and that aspect of it, I think, much better for all the communities. So that's it for me.
All right, so now we're going to open it up to Q&A. I'll be walking around with the mic if anybody has some initial questions. Otherwise, we've also got some to ask the panelists on. So.
Hi, I'm kind of a, well, forget it. I have a master's in urban planning and policy as of 2012. I just thought I'd let you know that from UIC. But I ended up in a Metro train station in Glen Ellen. And here's my comment. Glen Ellen has signs everywhere that says walk your wheels when the sidewalks are full, and they are full. But this is the real big problem, and I think you've been seeing this also on CTA and Metro downtown and whatever. There's a platform between the station wall to the rail. The problem is that these scooter people, they say walk your wheels, they're thinking bicycles, or I don't care what they're thinking. But they're just racing by, platform full of people. Same thing for bicycles sometimes, although not so much. And what I'm wondering is, can different organizations like NEDA and schools and police and Metro and what's going on, come together and just say no electronic things on train platforms? Is there a policy that we could write, and that could be region-wide at least?
Thank you for that. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, cool. Thank you for that. Again, I'm saying this from the perspective of Ride Illinois, so, bicycle advocacy organization. I think, we can't, speak for every rider, nor do we justify anyone doing, if it says no wheels, no wheels, we agree with that. The one thing that I would say is that we want to encourage ridership and first mile, last mile trips, and, especially, with parking and stuff, we'd rather than people driving, especially because no one drinks on Metro ever. So that's something where I think it would be, it sounds like if there's signs everywhere, it's less, less that the enforcement, education, all that's not working than going all the way and trying to eliminate it, because there's obviously a desire to take, you know, I see them every day of people using scooters on either side of their, on their commutes. So that would be.
saying don't have it. I'm saying when you get to the platform,
Oh,
when you're sitting on the platform waiting for the train, there's not a lot of space there.
yeah. Yeah. No, and as an organization that, you know, advocates for adaptive bikes, you know, that's an access issue, an ADA issue especially. So, but I can't speak for Metro or the agencies. I don't think anyone here, unfortunately, can for the transit agencies. But I think that's a point well heard, that that no one should impede access, regardless on the platform.
Yeah, we do have a lot of conversations with our partners at the transit agency. So it's certainly something that we can bring up and see if it's something that they're looking into.
I mean, they can carry and walk their wheels, so they just can't go at 29 miles an hour through a crowded platform. Is the deal, sort of.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think anybody should be doing that. It does not sound safe.
Hey, thanks everybody for presenting. This is a rapidly emerging topic and an incredibly important one, so thanks for all your efforts and the presentation. Deputy Chief, I appreciate the bringing in the adult education aspect with the parents. That's very important, and I like how Deerfield's doing that. Question is, we have a big issue with bikes and especially E-motos riding on sidewalks here in the city. I know you said enforcement's tough, but just curious what you and maybe the others have seen with enforcement efforts. I know there's a lot to enforce with this, but particularly with riding on sidewalks. I do like to bike. I'm a part-time biker, but pedestrians, walkers are continually getting less and less space. So just curious on enforcement efforts and watching out for walkers too on sidewalks. Thanks, everybody.
That was one of the main concerns or comments we were getting was when somebody going out to walk their dog and got the bikes flying by them, which is why we pushed everything onto the street, which was against some people's wishes. But it goes back to and I can't speak for Chicago, and Chicago and Deerfield they're polar opposites, so I can't speak for that. But if you look at all the educational contacts we had, if you basically can connect those to, I guess, enforcement to tickets, if you want to just change it. So I think our enforcement efforts are very positive. We have not gotten in as many complaints about the sidewalk riding. So they're at least, moving to the road, whether they're legal or not. At least they're moving to the road. In the Park District right now is adopting our ordinance for the little shortest time that it is, so that it's going to keep them off their walking paths as well. But that was one of our bigger concerns. And a lot of people were afraid that their little dogs were going to get killed and run over. That was a big concern for us. So we did move them off the sidewalk, per se.
Hello. This question is directed at Sidney, Kenyon, as a representative Schaumburg. I just want to note, as you probably are aware, Cook County did a bike plan, and one of the things I was trying to document was all of the off-street bike systems available, so side paths and trails. And I do note, particularly in the Schaumburg the Schaumburg Bikeway System, I believe that's its official name. I'm not sure if you trademarked it or not. But
I did, actually.
In some cases, there are 4- and 6-foot sidewalks that are part of the bikeway system. I, to be fair, did include them because that's specifically called out in Schaumburg, but of course that brings in an issue of all the other communities, not Chicago and all that, where actually adults are legally allowed to still ride on the sidewalk, since Illinois state law says that's okay unless there's local preemption. But just specifically to Schaumburg, insofar as you have your ordinance that I believe up to 20 miles an hour e-bikes is acceptable on the bikeway system, but yet you do have these segments, and granted, not all of them, but it is actually a sidewalk width, but nonetheless, you're saying it's part of the bikeway system. So I assume that's okay, right?
Right. As somebody who's a relative newcomer to the Schaumburg Bikeway Network, which I did trademark, by the way, I will say that I do think it is peculiar that we have those kinds of facilities. It is unusual. And many of those facilities are part of our capital improvement program to turn into full-fledged 8 to 10 foot bike paths. So Spring and Scooth might be one that you're familiar with, but I won't go into the detail for this crowd. But yes, that's something that we're working on to make them into ASHTO designed bike paths.
Hi, I know I'm between us and the happy hour, so I won't make this too long. But this is kind of directed to all of you, whoever wants to weigh in. I'm a cyclist, and I'm just wondering. Obviously, as planners, we see e-bikes more so than e-motos as a great solution for mobility, especially for young people. And so I'm just curious, on the flip side of things, what education and resources, policy, programming, ordinances, whatever it may be, for drivers are in place to kind of understand the space that they're allowed to take up legally.
That's probably a good question for you.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the 2018, bike education law, and then there's, I know that's a big initiative of the League of American Bicyclists is the Drive Safe program. So, that is the overall goal, because as you mentioned, it is funny, like all bicyclists, at least you didn't say avid, but how bicyclists identify themselves as cyclists, but most of us, over 90% also drive, who are of age. And I think that's where we're going. We're trying to move towards that mobility education so that everyone understands the responsibility, and that that you also, even people who don't plan to be avid cyclists, at least understand some of these modes broadly, so that when they're driving near them, they're safe. That a more holistic approach will help everyone and make everyone safer.
I'll also add that communities like Schaumburg that are bike-friendly communities, for us to want to upgrade to the next level, we've been at bronze for like 40 years now. For us to want to upgrade to that next level, to that silver, that gold level, we do have to improve our instruction. And so it is something that is on our radar right now. I shouldn't say on our radar. It's something we want to accomplish this year, is to provide more instruction for folks for how to ride safely and also how to be aware. And so point taken, there should be some engagement with the motorists as well.
And just real quick, because I know it's happy hour. The education that we do at the farmers market and any other time that we do community roll calls as well, where these topics come up, and a lot of the questions are, on Saturday and Sunday, the race style bikes. I'm not a bicyclist. Hurts. Road bikes. We get complaints on them more than because they're blocking the roadway. But that's our way of also educating the motoring public that they're doing everything they need to be and correctly. So we do work on the education with that as well.
And well, it's 4:15 now, so we will not keep any of your times at all. But please join me in giving a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much for coming, and enjoy happy hour.